So we're going to talk about the elements, and I'm going to show how we can actually start to harmonize these elements of your story. We're going to start with the line because we're going with the geometry theme here. So I'm going to have all these different kinds of basics, geometric symbols. So we're talking about the line. The line is very important in writing, but also in the visual arts because it's usually the first stroke we make as a visual artist. And what artists typically do is they start to create what's called a line of action. This is the first line they draw when drawing a figure. And you notice this is in this example, what we've done here is we've created a stroke that goes all the way across to the top from the foot to the head, and it shows the whole reflection of the bend of the figure. We do this because we want to show the mood and grace of the actual composition, not to mention of where to position the figure and the direction of flow. This line kind of expresses the movement, like I said, the composition, the mood, the drama in the story. Animators do the same thing, but they exaggerate these lines to make them even more dramatic. So if they're sad, the lines kind of curve downwards like a hunched over arch, or they're super proud, so they bend closer at the crest of the type and then kind of go straight down. What these lines do is they help the artist figure out what comes next. And for the writer, we have to come up with the same principles. So in a sense, an artist draw lines, writers write them. So the first line that a writer needs to write is the premise. In the premise line, what we're looking for is an overall core of a story that we were trying to come up with. Let's say you have an idea for a story. The first bit of idea you want to do is actually write the premise. So here's an example of a premise line. When a princess falls into the mortal danger, a young man uses his skill as a fighter to save her and defeat the evil forces of a galactic empire. Kind of sounds like a Disney film, right? But it's actually Star Wars. So you're thinking, well, wait a second. Where's the Luke? Where's the Wookiees, the lightsabers? Where's all that? The truth is that the premise line is the simplest movement you can make. And so you're looking at the core of the story, what your story is really about. So you can actually take out all of those details and just focus on what the character is. When a princess falls into mortal danger, that's the premise. A young man uses his skills as a fighter to save her and defeat the evil forces of a galactic empire. What you're showing is what's at stake, who are the main characters, and what is the tension? What is the conflict of the story? So a really great way to do premise lines, or the reasons why you want to do it, is it helps you to brainstorm many possibilities. So in case you do have a story idea, you can write one premise line, but you can write a whole bunch of them at the same time, coming up with different variations of that same one. And the thing is, it helps you save time on understanding if your story is going to work or not, because you can write a couple different premises and then show them to people and see how they respond. Because if they don't like any of them, it's back to the drawing board, and you've only wasted 4 sentences, not 4 years of your life. Okay? It's also important to keep away from those details. It's really easy to go in and start, oh, it's about this, about that, it's about this, and it's about that. You want to focus on just what happens, the causality of it, and the conflict. Also make sure it's brief. You don't want to spend 40 hours of time writing your premise. You want to make sure that you got it right. So to get a sense of the central conflict, you always want to think about who fights whom over what. Okay, and that's a question you want to start asking yourself when you try to write it. And as a sense of a single cause and effect. So here's an example. Here's an example of a not so great one. A man falls in love and fights for his brother for control of a winery. So what do we have here? So we have a guy who falls in love with who? We don't know. And then he fights his brother. That is kind of like conflict, and for control of a winery. So that must be some sort of goal that he has. But if we rewrite it just a little bit with a cause and an effect, notice the difference. Through the love of a good woman, a man defeats his brother for control of a winery. So that comma separates cause and effect. So the cause, the love of a good woman. The effect is that he defeats his brother for control of a winery. From this, premise line, we can start to draw out other strokes to shape our story. But we have a couple more lines to go. The next line is called the storytelling method. And this is how you're going to organize your story. Essentially, it's like finding an overall strategy of how you want to tell your story. So you know what you want to say. Now you just have to figure out how you want to say it. So here's an example. So this is Citizen Kane, the film. You don't necessarily need to read it. You just need to know what the premise line is. The premise is tell the life story of a rich newspaper baron. The method in doing so is use a number of storytellers to show that a man's life can never be known. This strategy allows you to kind of start to show possible structure ideas right from the start, because you know now that you're going to need a couple of characters to start doing what's called a storyteller technique. They're going to start to reminisce on this particular newspaper baron and think about how that person affected them. Okay. Here's another one from The Sting. I really like this one. So the premise line is two con artists swindle a rich man who killed one of their friends. It's pretty simple, but the storytelling method line is very interesting. Tell the story of a sting in the form of a sting and con both the opponent and the audience. Possible plot twist of how we're going to do that. The next line is called the theme line. It's essentially what's called the moral argument. So here's the theme. Theme is the author's view of how to act in the world. It is your moral vision. This is by John Truby. He is a story doctor in the Hollywood world. He wrote a book called The Anatomy of Story. This is a lot of where this information is coming from because he did an excellent job of understanding and breaking down story elements into its finite pieces. When we think about the theme line, you want to keep it simple. You don't need to be super complex or academic. You can start to think of it as a seed and which is going to grow into multiple pieces. And the cool thing about these lines is the storytelling method is really something you're going to be drawing from for continuing forward. The storytelling, these lines help you grow your story in a more organic way. And so some of these are going to feed off of each other. So your theme line is going to look towards your storytelling method to figure out what to do next. So here's an example of the sting. So we review the storytelling method, tell a story of a sting in the form of a sting and con both the opponent and the audience. The theme line is a little lying and cheating are okay if you bring down an evil man. So we know that as storytellers, we're cheating the audience. We're making them think that they know what's happening, and then we pull the rug underneath them. We are essentially lying to them. And that is the theme of both how the characters are doing to the opponent and what the storytelling is doing to the audience. So the theme is also part of the structure of what we're trying to accomplish as a storyteller or a writer.